China's influence in this country is growing. And I'm actually going to do three instances of where China is making an impact in this country. Now, it's going to get from okay, it's not that big of a deal to yeah, that's not a good thing to yeah, that's bad. That's the levels we're going. And so the first area that we're going to talk about on the 1st of July 2025, I'm recording this on the 2nd. Two Chinese have been busted for spying on the U.S. military in liberal land in Washington state. And you're going, oh, how's that not a bad thing? The U.S. military is prepared for it. The smarter people in the military are well aware of the fact that there's going to be some low level snot, and basically that's what they're going to be. They're going to be some low level little snot that is going to become a Bradley Manning or is going to be ideologically twisted. Higher ups in the military know this is going to happen. We also know that we're going to be spied on from our military. We're prepared for all of that. We really are. And we can deal with that. There might be some repercussions, but we can deal with it. So let's let you hear about these folks real quick.
Howdy, y'all. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. What we have here is a channel to communicate. I want you folks to be thinking by the time you leave my videos. Why? Because I'm tired of people talking via what other people tell them to think. So, watch my video and enjoy the chance to think for yourself.
The FBI says it has arrested a pair of spies from China. The Justice Department announcing the arrest in Oregon and Texas Tuesday. They say the pair took part in multiple operations on behalf of the Chinese government, including paying informants, spying on military bases, and trying to recruit U.S. troops to spy on America. News Nation's Xavier Walton has the detail. Xavier, good morning. How long were these alleged spies actually operating within the United States borders?
Hey, Nick, good morning. And to answer your question, the Justice Department says years. The Justice Department says that these two Chinese nationals were taking pictures of a naval base, coordinating a cash dead drop, and also trying to recruit members of our military who they thought might be open to working for Chinese intelligence. The FBI says that Yuan Chen, as well as Loren Ryan Lai, have been working under the direction and control of the government of the People's Republic of China since May of 2021. Here are photos of the large amount of cash they reportedly paid to one informant and the backpack it came in. The two men were arrested on charges of secretly doing China's bidding without registering as foreign agents with the Justice Department, which is against the law. According to the FBI, the accused Chinese spies also conducted surveillance of a California Navy recruiting station and a Navy base in Washington state, which included photos and videos that investigators believe were sent to Chinese intelligence. Attorney General Pam Bondi saying in part, this case underscores the Chinese government's sustained and aggressive effort to infiltrate our military and undermine our national security from within. And take a look at this. The FBI says since the start of the year, 2025, the agency has arrested 51 foreign intelligence agents for activities such as spying on the U.S., stealing classified information from the U.S. government, and smuggling biological pathogens, among other things. FBI's Director Kash Patel says his agency is not done yet and that espionage on U.S. soil will be met with full force, Nick.
And once again, showing how operatives are always working to try and corrupt those who have access to.
The next level of this scale that we're going up is political influence. Now, you notice that the vast majority of the Chinese spies that are working to influence our political system are working for Democrats. I know that any liberal listening to this is going to be upset because oh, there has to be Chinese spies working for Republicans. Well, somehow with a media that is vastly pro Democrat, and for years, well, for decades, a government that was vastly pro Democrat and still is to an extent, they found very few, almost every single spy that I can figure out has worked for a Democrat. So this should tell you that they know that they can work with Democrats because, well, Democrats don't like you having individual rights. They have never wanted you to have individual rights unless you're one of their higher ups. They want to take away your ability to defend yourself. They want to cause you to celebrate mental illness instead of defend it. So this is who the Chinese work with to influence the U.S. Hochul and Cuomo. The person I'm going got a little bit long of video, but her name is Linda Sun. Now, the one that I'm going to put up there is from the original arrest. And it's going into a lot of the influence that she had. Linda Sun was her name. She was a DEI person. No joke. She was a DEI person for Chief Diversity Officer for Cuomo. She was Deputy Chief of Staff for Hochul. She was educated by the very best of liberal education. She has been Chief of Staff for an Assemblywoman, Grace Meng, and worked as a campaign manager for Austin Ching, a Democrat who unsuccessfully ran for Congress in New York's 3rd Congressional District, appointed Director of External Affairs for Empire State Development. In other words, this is a very connected woman, and all connected because she worked with the Democrat Party. You take a look at the Democrat that worked for that. Well, okay, I don't think he worked for Eric Swalwell, whatever his name is. She worked for another member of Congress in China, and her and this Swalwell fella, possibly, from what they were saying, may have, you know, been playing that 70s mood music. Let's get it on. Yeah, that kind of stuff. But let's let you hear this about this woman, Linda Sun.
Well, Yvonne, good morning here from Ann Arbor and good evening to you. So Linda Sun was formerly a political aide in the Democratic circles in New York State, to include, I believe, serving time with the current governor, Kathy Hochul, and previously with Andrew Cuomo when he was governor. So this is someone who had risen to the inner circle of Democratic politics in New York State. And the fact that she's now been charged by the Department of Justice and arrested by the FBI and she and her husband facing all these charges in the indictment, that's a pretty shocking development.
How was her alleged work for the Chinese government discovered, and what formal charges have been laid?
So that investigation into her appears to have been going on for several years, and I'm sure there were a variety of different methods and techniques that were used to build the case against Linda Sun and her husband. It appears that a lot of this is based on, or a lot of the investigation is based on the financial transactions that she and her husband were involved in, and based on what's revealed in the indictment, an enormous amount, or they both received an enormous amount of money and then used all these clever financial schemes to sort of try to cover their trails and purchase properties and cars and do all these things you're not supposed to do when you're in public service. And then even if you left public service and you're working on behalf of a foreign government, you have to declare that under the law that they were charged under. And that's what they didn't do. They never declare themselves as agents of the Chinese government.
Can you tell us a bit more about the lavish lifestyle they led, and will all of this be used as evidence against her?
Well, from what's come out is that she and her husband owned a $4.4 million house in Long Island, which most people who work in public service cannot afford. I say that as a former government employee myself. And then they had a separate multi-million-dollar condominium in Honolulu. The husband apparently bought very brand new luxury vehicles. So these are all red flags for if you're building an investigation or a criminal to say, how is a person who is only supposed to be making X amount of money, at least from their known salary, their known income, now able to afford things that seem far outside their means? And that's probably another thing that led investigators onto their trail, in the sense that they were able to purchase these residences and all the other things and live this lifestyle that just seemed out of the ordinary for most public servants.
And David, what overall impact do you think their alleged actions likely had on the offers of the former New York governor where she worked?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of damage control right now within Democratic circles in New York to try to figure out what, if anything, did Linda Sun compromise from a policy perspective. Now, again, this wasn't the Democratic Party. This wasn't Washington, D.C. She wasn't involved in anything, as far as we can tell, from a national security perspective. But if you're looking at it from the other side of the Chinese government, and you're trying to find someone who's got placement and access to very important people here in the United States, well, Linda Sun was a great candidate for that. And she, over time, got recruited and then was feeding information or was trying to use her access to influence policy, even within New York, on behalf of the Chinese government. So I still think it's unclear the impact. Obviously, it's significant. Whether it goes beyond New York into Washington or other parts of the country, that'll also be interesting to see. But this to me is just the latest revelation of a much deeper campaign of Chinese influence operations and recruitment for intelligence purposes of people here that they've been doing now for quite a long period of time. How
widespread do you think it is?
Well, it's very widespread. The Washington Post actually yesterday came out with a story that was talking, a separate story about these Chinese influence operations here in the United States that were timed to occur when President Xi came to San Francisco a couple of months ago, and all the things that different elements of the Chinese government were trying to do to sort of promote his visit and also denigrate anti-Communist Party or anti-Xi protesters here in the United States. So that's a pretty interesting revelation. And then there have been a number of espionage-related investigations and cases with people either formerly in the intelligence community, the world that I came from, or in the military, active duty Army, Navy, personnel. So this seems to me that we're, at least here in the United States, we're facing a much more pervasive campaign of Chinese intelligence operations and influence operations, and the arrest of Linda Sun is just the latest in this long pattern of activities.
Well, one of those examples that you just mentioned, former CIA officer Alexander Yung Ching Ma admitted he had worked for the Chinese government. What penalties has he faced?
I'm not sure if he got charged with violations of the Espionage Act or other federal laws, but this is, again, as someone who came from that world, that is not something you are supposed to do when you take an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution and protect U.S. national security and be exposed to all this very sensitive information and intelligence. And my colleagues in the intelligence community take great steps to make sure that people do not sort of turn their back on the U.S. government and engage in these kind of activities. And unfortunately, he is an example of someone who did that. But whatever the charges he's facing, I'm sure they're significant, and this is the consequence. This is the consequence of violating your oath to the Constitution.
Just finally, what do you think will likely happen to Linda Sun and her husband now?
Well, now they're going to face a federal criminal trial, and the burden of proof to prove that Linda Sun and her husband were guilty of these charges, the burden of proof rests on the U.S. government. So it's a fair and open criminal trial. They will have, Linda Sun and her husband, their defense team will have access to all the information that the government has. And then it's going to be a question of, will they both, based on the evidence that's being presented against them, will they actually try to go to trial and contest that in a jury trial, or will they seek a plea deal with the U.S. government and get a lesser amount of jail time, but then cooperate with the U.S. government to potentially shed insight on some of these other things we've been talking about? So it's unclear how it's going to proceed from that legal perspective.
We'll be watching closely. Javed Ali, thanks so much, as always, for your time.
All right. Thank you, Iman.
Oh, by the way, she also was involved with pandemic fraud. She stole money from the U.S. government. Go figure. But let's talk about the worst thing that China does that has the biggest impact on U.S. culture. The U.S. as a whole. And it's a simple fact that they are working with U.S. influencers, Canadian influencers. They're working with influencers that have an impact in the U.S. They're working with these people to make their country look better. They're not just, at least with Israel, we understand that connection. The Jewish folks of the world are working together because they don't want liberals to have the control, to have another 1930s, 1940s Germany. And everybody's going, but they were right wing. No, they weren't. They were anti-gun. They were pro-large government. Everything that you see in the Democrat Party, they were, except for the Republican Party is a little bit more nationalistic and a little bit more pro-military than the Democrats. But the Democrats have been growing in that. But the influencers have been making an impact, and they have been trying to change the narrative. And these influencers are working with not just social media, but they're also getting on to mainstream media. Think about that for a minute. This is how they're truly influencing things. So let's let you hear a little bit of something about this one.
I think people sometimes underestimate what normality is. It's totally normal here. People are nice, doing their job, living their life, very welcoming.
From touring a farm in Xinjiang to sampling Uyghur food and culture, these videos paint a rosy picture of a region many Western journalists are blocked from accessing. Fergus Ryan with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute says it's part of a state effort to counter reporting of human rights abuses in Xinjiang.
They want to flood out any other competing information that might show a more realistic, a fuller picture of what's happening in China, and just flood the zone with this positive content.
According to a report from the Institute, the content was created by about a dozen influencers popular on Chinese social media. Westerners living in China with pro-government views. They were invited on trips organized and often paid for by the Communist Party. State-owned media then amplify the videos across various platforms, not disclosing the government's role.
They think that foreign audiences will be much more receptive to their narrative if it's coming from a foreign face, a non-Chinese face.
While most China-based influencers declined CBC's interview requests, we did connect with Canadian Daniel Dumbrell. He's lived in China for more than a decade. With 165,000 subscribers on YouTube, his videos defending Chinese policy in Xinjiang are popular and often amplified by state media.
If anywhere else in the world was doing the same thing, it would be called a marketing campaign.
But China isn't just using influencers at home. It's also recruiting American-based social media stars. Open Secrets, a Washington-based watchdog, uncovered documents showing China paid a company $300,000 to recruit influencers. The contract shows they want posts highlighting Olympic events, touching moments, and China-U.S. relations. Content that's unique and customized by the influencer.
they'll be coming from Instagram accounts or Twitch accounts of Western influencers who may already have sway with their audiences and not give the appearance necessarily of being agents of the Chinese government.
What the documents don't show is if any American influencers are working on behalf of Beijing. But experts say, given the draw of the Olympics and the clicks that come with it, it may be hard for some influencers to pass up. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Zhangjiakou, China.
China has been working hard to cause the U.S. to be more aligned with their values. Their values of, we don't want people to have individual rights, just like the Democrat Party. They don't want people to have a say in their government, just like the Democrat Party. And you're going, but the Democrat Party, they're Democratic. No, they're not. You take a look at this past election, they're really not. You take a look at the election in 2016. No, they're really not. The Republican Party does a far better job of giving you who you want. I may not always agree with the Republican choice, but it's what people want, unlike the Democrat Party. You got Hillary instead of Bernie, even though most Democrats wanted Bernie because, well, Hillary paid off the debts. And you got Kamala Harris. Even though she couldn't win a primary, you've got her running in the general election. Really? They're influencing so many different areas. And they're using social media. They're using our elected officials. But it's the use of influencers that is winning everybody over. And this is the wildest part. It really is. It is the part that people need to go, what are we doing here? Now, I don't mind watching certain influencers, but why are you going to take life advice from them? Hey, there are some fun things to do in China. I'm well aware of this. But they're also led by a political party that is heinous to their people. And you're letting these people influence your thoughts. But you go right ahead and do that. We need to get to the point where common sense is more common, but it ain't anymore. Oh well. This has been Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Y'all have a good day now. Bye. So folks, that's the story that I wanted to bring you on this video. And I just wanted to say thank you again for coming by. Hit like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff if you don't mind. Help me out. So, y'all have a good day now. Bye.